They planned the whole trip at my kitchen table. I made the coffee, I cut the cake. I listened to them talk about flights and hotel rooms and what the kids would love, and not once did anyone turn to me and say, "What do you think, Mom? Do you want to come?" My daughter-in-law did most of the talking. She always does. My son nodded along the way he's done since he was a teenager, agreeable to whoever was in the room. And my two grandchildren, 12 and 9, were already half asleep on the couch by the time the itinerary was finalized. Yellowstone. 2 weeks. Late June. I drove home that night with the windows down even though it was cold. I needed the air. They called me 3 days before they left, not to invite me, to ask if I'd water the rose bushes and take in the mail and maybe keep an eye on the house while they were gone. "You'd just be bored out there, Mom," my son said. "All that walking, you know how your knee gets." My knee. I'd walked 5 miles at the state fair the previous September without a word of complaint. But yes, my knee. I said I would. I said of course. I said have a wonderful time. I hung up and sat in the kitchen for a long while. The refrigerator hummed. The clock on the wall clicked. I was 67 years old and I was being asked to hold down the fort while my family went on without me. Then I stood up, went to the desk in the hallway, and pulled out my passport. Still valid. I'd renewed it 2 years ago on a whim, some half-formed idea I'd never followed through on. I opened it and looked at the empty pages. My name is Frances. No, wait, let me start again with what matters. I'm 67. I spent 31 years teaching 4th grade in a small town in Ohio. I raised my son mostly alone after my husband, Roger, passed. I've been reliable, dependable, and present for every single thing this family has needed from me. And that Tuesday night, sitting in my quiet house with a passport that had never been stamped, I decided I was done waiting to be invited to my own life. I didn't call them. I didn't announce anything. I simply pulled up a browser, typed in flights to Lisbon, and started reading. By midnight, I had a ticket. 1 seat, aisle, departing in 4 days. I'd had a little over $14,000 in my savings, set aside slowly, carefully, the way you do when you've lived through enough lean years to never trust abundance. I used a fraction of it, enough for the flight and 2 weeks at a small guest house I found through a travel blog written by a woman about my age. Clean rooms, affordable, a 10-minute walk from the old city. I called my neighbor Dot in the morning. She's 72, sharp as a tack, and has heard enough of my family's stories to fill a book. "I need you to water my rose bushes," I said. She was quiet for a beat. "Are you going somewhere?" "Portugal," I said. Another beat. Then, good Lord, finally. I packed light. 1 carry-on, the small plaid one I've had since the 90s. Comfortable walking shoes. A cardigan that's gotten me through every season. The blue linen dress I bought at a boutique in Columbus and never worn because I was always saving it for something that never quite arrived. I packed it first. The night before I left, I sat on the back porch and watched the fireflies come out. The same yard where I pushed my son on the swing set. The same porch where Roger and I used to drink iced tea and not say much of anything because we didn't need to. 30 years in this house and I had become part of its furniture. Quietly useful. Easy to overlook. I didn't leave a note for my son. I texted Dot the key code for the door, told her the rose bushes needed water every other day, and went to bed. The airport was loud and bright and full of people who all seemed to know exactly where they were going. I felt out of place the way you do when you've been still for too long and suddenly you're moving. I stood in line at security behind a young woman with a stroller and 2 carry-ons and a toddler attached to her hip, and I thought, I remember that. I remember being that strapped down. Now my bag weighed 11 pounds. On the plane, I took my seat, buckled in, and looked out the window at the tarmac. A woman about my age sat down next to me. Small, tidy, reading glasses already on. A crossword folded in her lap. We nodded at each other the way travelers do. She didn't ask where I was going. I appreciated that. I slept in patches, ate the little packet of pretzels, watched the darkness outside the window go gradually pale. when the coast of Portugal appeared below us, green and brown and rimmed with silver. Something in my chest loosened that I hadn't even known was tight. I hadn't told my son where I was going. I figured the rose bushes would hold. Lisbon met me with heat and the smell of something baking and streets that tilted at angles no American city would permit. My guest house was on a narrow lane near Alfama, run by a man named, I'll call him the proprietor, because his actual name I couldn't pronounce correctly, no matter how many times he corrected me, and we both eventually found that funny. He handed me a skeleton key attached to a small piece of cork and pointed me up 2 flights of stairs. The room was small. White walls, blue tiles around the sink, a window that opened onto a courtyard where someone had strung laundry between 2 buildings. I set my bag on the floor and sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. I had not cried yet. I didn't cry now. I just sat there and felt the particular quiet of being somewhere no one knew your name. That first evening, I walked without a plan, down cobblestone streets so old they seemed to breathe. I found the little restaurant with 3 tables on the sidewalk, ordered grilled fish and a glass of white wine, and ate by myself while 2 cats argued under the neighboring table. The waiter refilled my water without being asked. Nobody rushed me. Nobody needed anything from me. I ate the whole fish, ordered dessert, walked back slowly in the dark, running my hand along the tile-faced walls. The next morning, I put on the blue dress. There was a market a few blocks from the guest house, and I wandered through it with no purpose other than looking. Vendors selling dried figs and embroidered linens and pottery that caught the morning light. I bought a small ceramic tile painted with a rooster, a famous symbol here, the proprietor had explained. Not because I needed it, but because it made me smile, and I couldn't remember the last time I'd bought something purely because it made me smile. My phone buzzed, a message from my daughter-in-law. How is everything? Did the mail come yesterday? I looked at the message for a long moment. Then I put the phone back in my bag. She didn't know I wasn't there. She thought I was home, reliable and present, tending their rose bushes. I felt something then, not guilt exactly, something more complicated, like watching a door close from the outside, slowly and without drama. I met Constance on my 3rd day. She was sitting alone at a cafe on a steep little street, reading a worn paperback with a cracked spine, and when I hesitated in front of the empty chair across from her, she looked up and said, "Sit down if you want. I don't bite and I'm not waiting for anyone." She was 69, retired pharmacist from Vermont, widowed 4 years ago, traveling alone for the 2nd time since her husband died. The first trip, she told me, she'd spent crying in hotel rooms. This one was different. How? I asked. She considered. I stopped being sorry for taking up space. We walked together that afternoon. She knew the city better than I did. This was her 3rd visit, and she had the gift of noticing things most tourists walked past. A doorway with intricate ironwork, a faded advertisement painted on a wall from before the war. The way the light hit the river at 4 in the afternoon, she said, was something she'd driven 1,000 miles to see again, and would drive 1,000 more. I liked her immediately. She didn't ask much. When I told her my family was on vacation in Wyoming and didn't know I was here, she just tilted her head and said, "Good." That evening, back in my room, I finally turned the sound on my phone. 17 messages. 6 from my son. 4 from my daughter-in-law. 1 from Dot, who said cryptically, "Your rose bushes are fine. You do what you need to do." And then 1 from my granddaughter. She's 12 and texts the way 12-year-olds do, all lowercase and half-spelled. "Grandma, where are you? Mom said you weren't home when she tried to call. Are you okay?" I stared at that message for a while. Then I typed back, "I'm okay, sweetheart. I'm traveling. I'll explain soon. Love you." She replied in under 10 seconds, "What? Where?" I sent her a photo. The courtyard I could see from my window. Laundry on the lines, a potted geranium, a slice of terracotta rooftop. She sent back, "That is so cool." I put the phone face down on the nightstand and slept better than I had in years. The calls from my son started the next day. I let them go to voicemail, not out of cruelty. I want to be clear about that. There was no malice in it. I simply did not have the words yet. And I had learned, somewhere in those 67 years, that silence kept carefully is better than words spoken too soon and regretted. Constance knocked on my door at 8 the next morning. She had a folded map and a look in her eye. "Sintra," she said. "It's 40 minutes by train, and you haven't lived until you've seen it." We took the train through the suburbs and into the hills, and when Sintra appeared, palaces painted yellow and pink rising from the forest like something out of a story, I grabbed Constance's arm without thinking. "I know," she said. We climbed until my knees complained. I climbed anyway. At the top, looking out over the Atlantic, I thought of my son telling me I'd be bored, that the walking would be too much. I thought of all the times I'd agreed with assessments of my own limitations made by people who'd never once asked me what I thought I could do. I bought a postcard at a little shop near the castle, addressed it to my granddaughter. "I am at the top of a palace in Portugal. The ocean goes on forever from here. Wish you were with me. Love, Grandma." I dropped it in the mail on the way back to the train station. The voicemails from my son grew more urgent. I could see the notifications stacking up. On the 4th day, I listened to one. His voice was measured the way it gets when he's trying to stay calm and not quite managing. "Mom, we don't know where you are." Dot said something about Portugal, which doesn't make any sense. "Please just call and let us know you're okay. The kids are asking questions." I put the phone down. It wasn't that I didn't love him. I love him the way you love something you made with your own hands. Something you shaped and worried over and patched up and sent out into the world hoping for the best. But love doesn't mean you stop being a person. And somewhere along the way, without anyone meaning to do it, I had been edited down to a function. The grandmother, the babysitter, the woman who watered the rose bushes. Constance and I had dinner that night at a place her guidebook had circled in pen. Long wooden tables, fado playing softly from a speaker someone had set on a windowsill. We ordered too much food and talked for 3 hours. She told me about her husband, what he'd been like in the early years, and then toward the end, I told her about Roger. About the year after he died, when my son and I circled each other carefully, both of us grieving and neither of us willing to say so out loud. About how I'd kept going because there was no other option, and how keeping going had eventually become the only thing I knew how to do. "And what do you actually want?" Constance asked, not unkindly, just directly, the way people who've outlived enough things can afford to be. I thought about it, really thought about it, the way you don't get to in regular life when someone always needs something. "To feel like a person again," I said, "not just a resource." She nodded like that was the most reasonable thing she'd heard all year. From Lisbon we went to Porto. I say we, though we hadn't planned it. It simply made sense, the way some things do when you're no longer consulting anyone else's schedule. We took the train north along the coast and arrived in the late afternoon, and Porto was different from Lisbon, rougher around the edges, more industrial, the river wide and brown between the old city and the wine caves on the opposite bank. We drank port wine in a dark little cave that smelled of oak barrels and old stone. The man who worked there was in his 80s and spoke no English and thought our pronunciation of everything was hilarious. He kept refilling our glasses. Constance leaned over at one point and said, "This is the best bad idea I've had in years." I laughed until I had to press a napkin to my face. That night, back at the small hotel where we'd found last-minute rooms, I sat by the window and read through all the messages I'd been ignoring. It was like reading a record of slowly dawning panic. My son's texts had moved from "please call" to "are you safe" to a long message that started formal and ended desperate. My daughter-in-laws were briefer. "We don't understand what's happening. The kids are worried." And then, buried in the middle of the thread, a voice memo. My son's voice, quieter than I expected. "Mom, I don't know if he'll listen to this, but I want to say, I know we didn't invite you on this trip. I know how that must have seemed. We thought, I don't know what we thought, that you wouldn't want to, that it would be easier. That's not a good enough reason. I'm sorry. Please just let us know you're okay." I listened to it twice. Then I set the phone face down on the windowsill and looked out at the river. He'd said sorry. But sorry for what exactly? For the logic of it, the assumption, or for the larger pattern that had built up over years like sediment? One voice memo didn't answer that. One sorry. Even a genuine one couldn't reach back and fix the birthday dinners where I sat at the edge of the table, or the holidays where I cooked everything and ate last, or the family meetings where decisions got made and I was told about them after. I wasn't angry in the way that burns. I was something quieter, tired of being considered manageable. The next morning, I opened a fresh voice memo and pressed record. I didn't rehearse it. I just talked. I'm in Portugal. I'm safe. I'm not saying this to punish you. I'm saying it because I needed to remember that I'm still someone who can do things, go places, choose. You told me my knee would give out. You told me I'd be bored. You didn't ask. You haven't asked me what I want or what I can do in a very long time. I love you. I love those kids more than I can say. But I am not just the person who waters the rose bushes. I don't know how we got here. I'd like to figure out how we find our way back, but not until I've had a little more sky. I'll call when I'm ready. I hit send before I could talk myself out of it. Then I went downstairs, found Constance already at the breakfast table, and ordered eggs and strong coffee. Did it, I said. She raised her cup. Proud of you. We spent another day in Porto before we went our separate ways. She was heading to Madrid. I had no particular plan, which felt luxurious and terrifying in equal measure. We hugged at the train station. She pressed a piece of paper into my hand with her phone number and email. Write me, she said. Or don't, and just live well. Either way. I chose a southbound train on a whim, the Algarve. I'd seen photos once in a magazine at a dentist's office and thought, someday had arrived. The coast in the south was different. The light was sharper and the cliffs were dramatic, orange and white stone dropping straight into the Atlantic. I found a small room above a bakery in a town that wasn't in any of the famous guidebooks, and I spent 4 days there doing almost nothing. Walking on the beach in the mornings, reading in the afternoons, a paperback thriller I'd found in a little used book exchange at the guest house, eating grilled sardines and bread and simple salads at the same outdoor restaurant every evening because the woman who ran it smiled at me every time like she was genuinely glad I'd come back. My granddaughter texted every day, not with panic, with curiosity. Did you see the ocean yet? What does the food taste like? Are there cool birds? I sent her photos. The cliffs at golden hour. A plate of custard tarts, the famous ones, that I'd finally found at a proper bakery and eaten 3 of in one sitting. A small donkey I encountered on a back road that had looked at me with the particular expression donkeys have, like they've seen everything and are still not impressed. She sent back, that donkey looks like my teacher, LAOL. I sent back a laughing emoji, first one I'd used in months. My son called once more, and this time I picked up. Mom. His voice cracked a little on that one word. I'm here, I said. Are you okay? Are you safe? I'm fine. I'm sitting on a beach in the south of Portugal eating a clementine. Silence. Then, okay. A long breath. Okay. I waited. I listened to your message, he said, a few times. I didn't fill the silence. I don't really know what to say, he said. I mean, I know what I should say. I'm not sure how to say it without it sounding like I'm just saying it because you scared us. Then don't say it yet, I said. Say it when you mean it. Another silence, but a different kind. Fair enough. Tell the kids I'll be home in a week. Tell them I want to hear everything about Yellowstone. They saw a bison up close, he said. Really close. Your grandson cried. Good, I said. He should have. We didn't say much else. But it was a different kind of not saying much, the kind that's working toward something rather than away from it. I sat on that beach for another hour after we hung up. The clementine was sweet. The light was going golden sideways over the water. A pair of older women walked past arm in arm, talking in Portuguese, laughing about something. They didn't look at me. I didn't need them to. I stayed 1 more day in the south. Then I took the long train back to Lisbon for my flight. The airport was the same chaos it had been when I arrived, the same glass and noise and rivers of people. But I moved through it differently now, not faster, just more like I belonged. The flight home was overnight. I slept almost all of it. When I landed in Columbus, the sky was gray and smelled of rain and cut grass. I took a cab. The driver was young and asked if I'd been traveling for work, and I said no, just for me. And he said that was cool, and I said yes, I suppose it was. My house was quiet. Dot had kept the rose bushes alive. There was a pot of soup in the refrigerator with a sticky note that said, "Eat this first. I made too much." I almost cried at that more than anything. I unpacked slowly, hung up the blue dress, put the ceramic rooster on the windowsill above the kitchen sink where the light would hit it in the mornings. My granddaughter showed up the next afternoon without calling ahead. That's her way. She moves like weather, arriving before you've thought to look at the sky. She dropped her backpack in the doorway and said, "Okay, so I want to see every single photo." We sat on the couch for 2 hours going through my phone. She had opinions about everything. The donkey photo was her favorite. The cliffs, she said, looked fake. She wanted to know if I'd eaten octopus. I had not eaten octopus. She was mildly disappointed. "Dad feels really bad," she said after a while, not looking up from the phone. I didn't say anything. "Like actually bad," she said, "not just embarrassed bad." "I know the difference," I said. She looked up then. She has her grandfather's eyes. This child, that particular quality of paying attention that some people have and most people don't. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Like really?" "Yes," I said. "More than I've been in a while." She seemed to consider this. "You look different," she said. "Different how?" She shrugged, the way 12-year-olds do when they know something they don't have quite the words for yet. "Like you're not waiting for something." I looked at her for a long moment. This girl, who noticed things. Who would be a woman someday and need to know that women don't stop deserving their own lives at any particular age or milestone, or decree from people who love them without quite seeing them. "Don't wait," I said. "Whatever it is, don't wait for someone to invite you. Go." She nodded slowly. "I don't know if it landed. She's 12. Some things take time to grow into, but I planted it, and that's what grandmothers are actually for." My son came over that Sunday, alone. He sat at my kitchen table with his hands wrapped around a coffee mug the way he used to as a teenager, and for a moment he looked so much like he did at 17, uncertain, wanting to say something, not knowing how, that my chest ached. "I've been thinking a lot," he said. "I figured," I said. "The thing is," he stopped, started over. "We made an assumption. We've been making a lot of them. About what you want. About what you can handle. About," he rubbed the back of his neck, "about whether you are still—" I don't know how to say this without it sounding terrible. "Say it anyway," I said. He looked at me. "Whether you are still someone with plans, wants, you know, a future," I said. "Yeah." He looked down. "That's terrible, isn't it?" "It's honest," I said. "I'd rather have honest." He was quiet for a bit. The refrigerator hummed. The ceramic rooster caught the afternoon light on the windowsill. "I'm sorry, Mom," he said. Not the voice memo version, carefully constructed. Just the words, straight and plain. "I'm really sorry." I reached across the table and put my hand over his. His hands are his father's hands, thick-knuckled and warm. I've noticed that for years and never said it. "You don't have to fix it all at once," I said. "You just have to see me." He nodded. I could tell he was trying not to cry, which meant he would later, in the car probably, the way men of his generation do, privately, where no one can witness it and hold it against them. Roger was the same way. "The kids want to take a trip over fall break," he said after a while. "Nothing big. Maybe the Smoky Mountains. I thought, if you wanted to come. If your knee—" "My knee is fine," I said. A small smile. "Yeah, I figured." "I'll come," I said, "on one condition." He looked up. "No one plans anything without asking me first. Not the route, not the hotel, not the restaurants. I get a seat at the table. He held my gaze for a beat. Deal. We drank our coffee. The afternoon light moved across the kitchen floor the way it does in October, low and golden and a little bit sad in the good way, the way things are when they're almost over, but not quite. Before he left, he stood in the doorway and looked at the rooster on the windowsill. "Where'd you get that?" "A market in Lisbon," I said. "You should go someday." He looked at me, really looked, the way he hadn't in a long time. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe I should." After he left, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea and the light going out over the yard. The rose bushes were fine. Everything was fine. I wasn't the same woman who'd sat in this chair 2 weeks ago watching the fireflies, feeling like furniture. I was still the same in the ways that matter. Still his mother, still their grandmother, still their grandmother, still the woman who made the coffee and showed up when it counted. But I was also, finally, unambiguously, still myself. I opened the little notebook I'd bought at a market stall in Porto and written nothing in until now, and on the first page I wrote one line. I stopped waiting to be invited and started deciding where to go. There's a ceramic rooster on my kitchen windowsill now. It catches the morning light every day, and every day I look at it and remember exactly where I was when I bought it. A market stall in Lisbon, alone, 67 years old, and more awake than I'd been in years. I didn't buy it because it was pretty. I bought it because it made me smile, and I'd forgotten that was reason enough for anything. I think about what it took to get there. Not the flight, not the packing. I mean the thing before that, the decision to stop waiting. I'd spent a long time telling myself the family needed me available, that being present meant being stationary. That love looked like sacrifice, and sacrifice looked like staying put. And somewhere in all that staying put, I'd quietly stopped being a person with plans of my own. What I understand now is that no one was going to hand that back to me. Not my son, not my daughter-in-law, not the calendar, not time. The longer I waited for an invitation, the more invisible I became. And the more invisible I became, the easier it was for the people who loved me to stop seeing me at all. That's not blame. That's just what happens when you make yourself too easy to overlook. People will take you at your word. Constance said something to me over a glass of port wine in Porto that I keep coming back to. She said she'd spent the first trip after her husband died crying in hotel rooms, and the second trip learning to stop apologizing for taking up space. It sounds simple. It isn't. It takes something, a particular kind of honesty with yourself that's harder than it sounds, especially when you've spent decades prioritizing everyone else's comfort over your own clarity. My son sat at my kitchen table and said he hadn't thought of me as someone who still had plans. He said it was shame, which was the right response. But I understood how it had happened. Because I had stopped acting like someone with plans. I had cooked the dinners and watered the rose bushes and nodded along. And somewhere in the accumulated weight of all that quiet usefulness, I had made myself smaller than I actually was. We teach people how to see us. I had been teaching them wrong. What changed in Portugal wasn't that I punished anyone. I didn't go to make a point. I went because the alternative, sitting in that house watching fireflies while my family drove to Yellowstone without me, was no longer something I could do in good conscience to myself. That's the only way I know how to say it. It was a matter of conscience, of basic self-respect, of knowing, at 67, that I still had things I wanted to see and feel and taste and be, and that wanting those things was not selfish. It was just true. My granddaughter told me I looked like I wasn't waiting for something anymore. She's 12, and she saw it before anyone else did. I think about what I want her to carry from all this. Not the drama of it, not the packed bag and the solo ticket. I want her to understand that the women who matter most are not the ones who disappear quietly into usefulness. They're the ones who stay soft enough to love and strong enough to leave the room when the room stops seeing them, or smart enough to know the difference between loyalty and self-erasure, who, when the moment comes, don't ask permission to still be themselves. I stopped waiting to be invited. That was the whole thing, really.